Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest that we have with us is Glen Depke. He is the Dr. Mercola brand educator and has lots of great expertise to share with you tonight on brain function and brain health. Thank you so much, Dr. Depke, for joining us.
Oh, awesome. It's always great to do anything with Marlene. You know that, Elizabeth. So it's always my pleasure. And tonight really this talk really hits home to me, which I'll bring up in a little bit. And while typically at this point I talk about like more of being a naturopath and working with Dr. Mercola and such, but I really want to talk about why this is so important to me tonight, and why it being important to me is makes it that much more really fulfilling and educational for everybody listening. And it's really just basically tied into what's going on with supporting your brain and cognitive health. And what I really need to bring up with this at the beginning is why this is such a personal aspect with me, is because of my family history. You see, I have a very strong family history of neurodegeneration. I had a grandmother who died with severe dementia. My mother spent the last 13 months of her life living in a hospital bed in my parents' living room, with my father feeding her baby food and changing her diapers every day. And then my mother passed with severe dementia. And my brother, actually in his younger 60s, actually passed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. So I'm always very candid about this. I very selfishly research brain health because I want to do everything I can to keep this happy and healthy, keep the brain happy and healthy. And so the joy of all this was, so rather than people suffering and going through traumatic things in their life for nothing, I feel that watching what members of my family has gone through has really obviously put me in a position to utilize not only my expertise, but to research something at the deepest level possible. And then so many other people can benefit. And that's what we're really into today with, again, the title of Supporting Your Brain and Cognitive Function. Now, before we get into really the nuts and bolts of all this tonight, is I first like to bring up something about Dr. Mercola that a lot of people don't know, is that when you go into Marlene's and you buy a Dr. Mercola product, it's not just about you getting a product that will potentially help support you in your health journey. It's not just about Marlene's as a business or Dr. Mercola's as a business. It's really what most people know is that 25% of all the net proceeds of what's sold through Dr. Mercola goes right back to support advocacy. This has been something that's been so important for Dr. Mercola since the very beginning of him being on the internet, and continues to today to really be the advocate for education to our general public. So talking about things like the non-GMO support and the right to no genetically engineered labeling, to anti-fluoridation, to the elimination of mercury. And as you can see with this, the list just goes on in all of what good that Dr. Mercola is actually doing, not just because of the information, but the simple fact that so much of the products goes right back into this advocacy. So I always like to bring that up because most people are not aware of that. And today, what we're going to discuss, we're going to obviously supporting brain and cognitive health. So this is not just about supplements. And one of the things I always like to bring up is, supplements are, as the word goes, is a supplement to what you're doing in your general lifestyle and your healthy habits. So we're going to talk about lifestyle support for supporting brain and cognitive health. We're going to also talk about today the gut-brain connection, to recognize that it's not just your brain working on its own, that about 90% of your brain output goes right down the vagus nerve into the nervous system tissue in the gut, and the surrounding area, and comes right back up. So you have to look at the gut and the brain collectively if you're going to really focus on supporting the brain. We're also going to talk about the importance of mitochondria to your brain health. It's one of those missing pieces of the puzzle for so many people that they don't have a focus on. And then, the brain could suffer because of that. We're also going to talk specifically about the brain and cognitive support that are important really to to live the healthiest level you can with your brain health for right now and also into your future. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about what's referred to as a healthy blood-brain barrier and why that's so important. Yeah, so we've got a lot of information to pack into about 52 minutes here. So we're going to get right going with this, and so we can make sure we leave some time for Q&A at the end. Now, as far as overall supporting your brain and cognitive health from a lifestyle perspective, these are things that are really important. And if, for those watching, please take notes throughout this, and because these are really important things to tie into just your general lifestyle. Now, the first one is trying new activities. So now this could mean learning a new language. This could mean learning a new musical instrument. This could mean that you're going to do things with your brain to stimulate your brain function. Maybe it's puzzles. I remember when I was just a child, we played a game called Memory, where you took every card on the playing card deck and you would turn it face down on the table, and you would have to pick up one card and then try to match the card. And then whoever collects the most cards would win. But to match it, you had to start to remember where other cards were that people picked up. So it was more of a memory type game. So different types of puzzles or games that stimulate your brain health. So all of those activities that we could do would potentially be very important for keeping the brain, really supporting the brain and cognitive health. The other thing that's so important with your brain is feeding the brain properly. And it's kind of a combination, not only feeding the brain, but also eliminating things that could cause some brain issues. So overall, with feeding your brain, one of the best things that I could bring up is really tied into something Dr. Mercola has talked about for a number of years now with his book, Fat for Fuel, and then keto fasting. One great way to be supportive for your brain and cognitive function is to eat a keto type of lifestyle diet, which would include low to moderate amounts of protein, which would also include keeping your carbohydrates at a low, what's referred to as a low net carb level, and then eating what we would consider really good quality healthy fats, maybe some derivative of avocados or olives or non-sugar added coconut, or maybe macadamia nuts as an example. Because when you eat in that way, where you keep your net carbs lower and you're getting in the protein you need for the day and the healthy fats that your body needs, it not only really is a great way of maintaining and helping support like normalized blood sugar already in a healthy level, or supporting your optimal weight, or supporting your overall energy production in your body. It's also eating in that way is also very supportive for mitochondria function and for brain function. A little bit later, you're going to understand how deeply mitochondria affects the brain as well. And so it's really about getting to the point where we can, as you see on the right there on the slide, that picture with the orange picture where it's the person kind of refusing the breads and the processed carbohydrates, and the green picture where they're kind of pushing away the thoughts of the sweets and the sugary base, and again looking at the picture in the yellow with eating, again, it's not all the protein you want, it's still just low to moderate protein, and really that low carb, those low net carbs is really a big key. Now after that, it's also the recognition that you want to think about what are the more problematic foods that would potentially cause issues with the brain. And these are typically known as either gluten sensitivities or gluten cross-reactive sensitivities, or just general food sensitivities. Because what most people don't recognize is that, number one, if you have a food sensitivity, about 86% of the people approximately are asymptomatic. So it's not that you eat the food and you feel terribly just after. I mean, the lucky ones are the 14% who have that recognition. So then they know what to stay away from, right? And then the rest of the people who are this 86% of the people, what happens is they eat the food, it drives this low level inflammatory response, which then over time affects the gut, the brain, the immune system, and even affects the hormonal system due to the inflammation. So the more common issues for most people are really tied into things like a gluten sensitivity, or even gluten cross-reactive foods, which means foods that are similar in molecular structure to gluten, but they're not gluten. So things like gluten-free grains, dairy, rice, soy, eggs, sesame, instant coffee, potatoes are just some of those potential, cross-reactive foods. And why this is so important is to remember, if you're eating a food that you have a sensitivity to, then that's still driving a low level inflammatory response, which in the end, as time goes on, it's having a bigger and bigger impact consistently on the brain, the gut, the immune system, and the hormonal system due to the inflammation. Yeah, another thing that's really important with your brain is to keep your body moving. A lot of people have heard of the cross crawl with children. When a baby is born and the baby first starts to crawl, that cross crawl is a recognition of the importance of that back and forth motion of a baby learning to crawl that also plays a big role in brain development. And for adults, we can still have a similar reaction with the cross crawl by doing what I always refer to as an exaggerated arm swing walk. Where you just go out for a walk, but instead of that casual little arm swing, allow your arms to swing all the way in front of you and then all the way behind you. And it really kind of mimics that cross crawl that infants acquire to help with their brain development. And that exaggerated arm swing walk is actually very beneficial for helping to just overall support your brain and your nervous system, which is the master regulator of your body, which is essentially extremely important, as you probably already well know. Yeah, so keeping movement in your daily life is very important for your overall brain health as well. Another thing is sleeping well. You see, because most of the toxins in your brain are actually released at night when you sleep. Dr. Mercola even had an article out not too long ago about how when we sleep, the brain actually shrinks slightly. And it helps to kind of almost like, think of like if you squeeze a sponge that has water on it, and the brain shrinks slightly and it pushes these toxins out of the brain to be released through the body to keep the brain healthy and clean from a toxic perspective. And on top of that, also the recognition is that when you sleep at night, that's when your immune system is the most active to maintain and repair your body, which is very important from a natural perspective. And to define sleeping well, I would typically say that this, in a general rule of thumb, that would be something like saying going to bed at 10 p.m., waking up at 6 a.m., getting a full, good, deep 8 hours of sleep, and then really waking up feeling refreshed, ready to take on your next day. So the sleeping well is another big component. Also tied in your brain health is getting social, which obviously over the last couple of years, there's been some challenge with a lot of people being social for obvious reasons. And, but it's that social interaction, which is so stimulating to the brain. And so really having a good, solid group of friends or coworkers or family members that you really enjoy time with, you enjoy your conversation with, and you enjoy that social interaction, because the social interaction in itself is very healthy for your brain. Other things that are really important just from a symptomatic standpoint in your body is, or just an overall function of your body would even be a better way to say that, is to make sure that you're enjoying healthy blood pressure and also enjoying healthy blood sugar. So your blood sugar is also very important. And so your blood sugar is so important that your body actually naturally manufactures two different steroidal hormones known as insulin and glucagon. And those two hormones regulate blood sugar. Now, most people have heard of insulin because, and honestly, most people heard of that because more people have a problem with too high of blood sugar. And the insulin is released in the body to help to lower the blood sugar levels. But then the glucagon is the antagonistic hormone to insulin. And the job of glucagon is to put glucose into your blood if you become deficient, if you have more of instead of hyperactivity, a hypoactivity. So your body knows how important blood sugar is to the point where you have two regulatory hormones to make it higher or to make it lower. And that's so important because your brain really requires just a very, very narrow range of blood sugar on a regular basis to function properly. And so both of those are very important from a brain and cognitive health perspective. Another Another really great tip from a lifestyle perspective is to limit your alcohol. There's so much research on drinking higher amounts of alcohol on a consistent basis has multiple negative impacts on the body, and especially negative impacts on the brain. And even if you're going to occasionally indulge in, let's say, a glass of wine, I would also recommend for the sake of your overall health, and really even more specifically, the health of your brain, uh, never drink a glass of wine on an empty stomach. You see, because alcohol is absorbed right through the stomach lining. And if you drink on an empty stomach, it's almost like saying, well, here's a direct line of alcohol to the brain, which obviously, and most people who have had a drink or two at some point in their lives will recognize that they feel the effects of alcohol much more significantly if they drink while their stomach is empty as compared to when their stomach is full. And it's simply because the absorption of the alcohol through the stomach lining to the brain is really like a direct track when you drink on an empty stomach. So if you are going to indulge in an occasional glass of wine or whatever your favorite spirit may be, then I would suggest that have a meal first and treat that almost as like your dessert at the end of the meal. So you don't have that big of an impact because of the full content in your stomach. Another thing that I would say is very important is protecting your head from injury. So if you're going to be out mountain biking, it's a great idea to have a helmet. Even if you ride a motorcycle and you're in a state where it's not the law to wear a helmet, it's a good idea to have the helmet on. So you want to think of it from the perspective, if you're doing anything that puts you at a more significant risk of falling or having some type of injury to your brain, you want to do whatever you can to protect that. Because the brain, obviously, between your brain and your nervous system, again, that is a master regulator for everything in your body, and so extremely important. So protect your head and your brain at all costs. And the other thing that's so important is managing your stress. Now, the simple fact is that we all have stress in our lives. You do, I do, everybody does. And it's more of what we do with it. It's almost like thinking from the perspective of how do you perceive your stress? And then how accomplished are you at releasing your stress? And I don't mean releasing by, raising your voice or yelling at somebody. It's just being able to release the emotional component of the stress. Because, the simple fact is, as I said, we're all stressed out on some level. And if we can perceive stress as an opportunity for growth, as an opportunity for learning, we can shift very often even the meaning of what stress is for us. And then even sometimes if we just change our language with stress, like maybe there's something you say that really stresses you out, that say, I have to do this, I have to do this. And very often if we could just change the words to, I choose to do this. Sometimes that's very freeing because it's rather than a have to, it's a choice. And then when it's a choice, we usually don't feel as stressed out about that. And there's literally so many tools for this. Whether we talk about things like meditation or prayer, or Dr. Mercola has obviously been a big supporter of emotional freedom technique, which is the acronym of EFT over the years, or really so many other different levels at which you can help to manage your stress levels. So what I really love for you to do with this, while of course I'm going to give you some tips on what you could use from a supplement perspective to really help with everything going on here, and more importantly, I want you to really recognize the importance of taking care of everything you can from a lifestyle perspective to give the supplements you take the best shot of really allowing you to enjoy that brain and cognitive function that you want for the rest of your life. And the other thing I want to bring up before we get into the supplement support is I want to talk about, like one of the things that I've seen too, I've shared my story and why brain health is so important to me. And yet I don't want you to just think about what it means to me. I want you to think about what it means to yourself and what it means to most other people. And the reason why I bring this up is it was a couple of years ago, I did a survey on social media, and the people I was surveying was tied into my own private practice. And in my private practice, the higher percentage of the people I work with are women who are also between the ages of 45 and 55. So I did this very interesting survey because I wanted to know, like, what is it that they're most concerned about as they age? Because when I'm working with people in that age group, I want to help them move into like their golden years in the best level of health and happiness that they possibly could. So the question I went out there that was only given to women between the ages of 45 and 55 was, what is that you fear most about aging? And it was interesting when I put together that question, that survey, I thought there'd be a wide array of different potential reasons for this. And I thought I'd hear things about like maybe retiring too early, retiring too late, becoming an empty nester, wondering how to transform my marriage once it's just the two of us rather than the family, or things like did I retire too soon or too late, or like all these other factors about aging that I thought would come up. And I was the furthest from really being right with that, because the most significant number one concern that I saw in that survey is women answering back with words like dementia, Alzheimer's, or just saying worried about my brain not working. And so the recognition is that for a significant amount of people, that is their main concern as they're aging. So these lifestyles tips are the beginning, and then this actually takes you further from a supplement perspective as far as that support. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the gut-brain connection. And as mentioned earlier, and I'm going to repeat this because this is so important, is that approximately 90% of your brain output goes right down the vagus nerve into the nervous system tissue in the gut and comes right back up. So when something is going on in your gut, something is going on in your brain. Like as an example, earlier when I was talking about things like a gluten sensitivity or these other food sensitivities, it's now recognized with all the research is that gluten is even a bigger issue for the brain than it is the gut. And I've seen so many people in the past that have had some significant gut issues that really manifest as what's going on in their brain, where all of a sudden people aren't remembering, or they're not comprehending as like they used to, or they might notice some challenges maintaining a proper mood for themselves, and all these different things go on because of that gut-brain connection. And that's why with the gut-brain connection, I always like to bring up the one thing that I think is important that everybody should be taking. That I would say that the only person who wouldn't need regular use of probiotics is somebody who every day you consume raw fermented foods that you've made at home, whether it be fermented vegetables or drinks and such, and you're enjoying them on a consistent basis all day, every day, which is not most people. I don't even, even though I have such a focus on my health, I don't create the time in my life to ferment foods or to ferment drinks. So for most people, we do have a dependency on using a good quality probiotic, such as the complete probiotic. And there's one thing that I like to always bring up about the complete probiotic that separates it from others on the market is there's one particular form, one strain of the beneficial bacteria in the complete probiotic, and it's called the DDS1 L-acidophilus. And this is the most researched form of beneficial bacteria that has been shown to be resistant to not only stomach acid, but also enzyme activity and bile. Whereas this really provides the best opportunity for this to naturally really make it throughout the entirety of the gastrointestinal tract, because so many probiotics are destroyed by either stomach acid or enzyme activity or bile. So to have something like the complete probiotics that not only contains a total of 10 different strains of the good bacteria that you want for your gastrointestinal tract, and also important, that long-lasting super strain of the DDS1 L-acidophilus. And I'll even say that it was about 3.5 years ago, we began putting this in what's known as a DR cap, which is the delayed release capsule, which even helps all of the different types of beneficial bacteria in this to make it and survive as long as possible in the gastrointestinal system, to not only support your gut health, also to support your brain and cognitive function as well. And I can share that I take one of the 70 billion complete probiotics every morning myself to really enjoy all those benefits. And after that, very important with your brain is also your mitochondria health. Now, mitochondria, most people think of mitochondria and they've heard sayings like the little engine that drives every cell in your body or the powerhouse of the cell. And then while that's true, it doesn't really give you the full impact of mitochondria. You see, what I want you to understand is your mitochondria is essential for all of the high energy needs of your body. And before I tell you what those are, it's also essential for approximately 97% of your energy production. Well, think about that. Who doesn't want more energy nowadays, right? That's something that almost everybody is looking for. Now, outside of the overall energy production, it is those high mitochondria needs that are really starving for mitochondria on a consistent basis. And what those would include is your muscular system, your kidneys, your liver, your heart, and last but not least, of course, your brain. And this is a reason for myself, because of my family history, I have a huge, really supportive factor for my mitochondria because I want to keep my mitochondria healthy, not only as the powerhouse of the cell, not only as having that 97% of my energy produced, and not only to enjoy the benefits to my muscular system, my kidneys, my liver, and my heart, and especially for my brain. Yeah, so that's how important mitochondria health is to not only the whole of your body, but also to your brain. Now, in supporting mitochondria, the first thing that I always feel is extremely important is something referred to as ubiquinol. Now, ubiquinol, what most people don't realize, because a lot of people, when we look at what's been exposed on the internet or through different levels of articles written or videos produced, is when people think about mitochondria, they usually think of the word CoQ10, or which was more technically known as ubiquinone. And what a lot of people don't realize is that ubiquinone or CoQ10, when you ingest that as a supplement, your body has to use what's referred to as your intrinsic factor to convert the ubiquinone, which is the CoQ10, into what is now known as ubiquinol. And then ubiquinol is what your mitochondria gets to enjoy using to support mitochondria function, thus supporting all these other areas of the body and also your brain health. Now, the challenge with this, yes, if you're younger and you've got a healthy digestive system and healthy intrinsic factor, by all means, you could use CoQ10 because that will then likely convert into the ubiquinol, and then that's what your body will use to support the mitochondria. Yet, there's a simple, well-known fact out there is that for most people, by the time we reach the ages somewhere between 30 and 35, that intrinsic factor that your body uses to convert the CoQ10 into ubiquinol begins to diminish. So the problem with that is now we've got people who are taking CoQ10, yet they're not converting it into ubiquinol, and therefore they're still not supporting the mitochondria. Yeah, so that's why the ubiquinol is so important, especially as we age. And as an example, at this point, as I'm doing this training here, I'm 57 years old. I take ubiquinol, and myself, I personally take 400 milligrams ubiquinol because I'm number one, I'm a larger person. I'm 195 pounds. I'm not a 150 pound guy, and the strong family history of neurodegeneration. So I'm making sure that I have plenty of ubiquinol to support my mitochondria. And a good overall dose in mitochondria, just to support of ubiquinol, in order to just general support for your mitochondria, is 200 milligrams. And from there, whether or not you need something to support further would be on your individual, where you're at individually, and maybe potentially, like me, just tied into a family history. So it's very important. And the one last thing I want to bring up about ubiquinol before I move on from this is the recognition that Dr. Mercola's ubiquinol is in something called a lead cap. It's a hard shell, low heat, hermetically sealed capsule that also contains a little nitrogen bubble to really protect the integrity of the ubiquinol, rather than the air permeable soft gels, because the soft gels can actually contain these little microscopic cracks in the soft gel, which then allows oxygen into the internal ingredients. And this is so important with ubiquinol. You see, because we use a form of, or a brand name of ubiquinol called Kanika. And I'll say that all of the quality companies that I've seen on the market today, they all use the Kanika brand of ubiquinol. They've got a very genuine, patented fermentation system to really produce what I would share is, in my opinion, the best form of ubiquinol on the market. But the whole thing though is that it says right on the Kanika website, if you look deep enough, you learn all the black and white of the text, you'll eventually run across a sentence that says that ubiquinol is a very unstable molecule. And when exposed to oxygen, ubiquinol can convert back into ubiquinone, which is CoQ10. And so that's why it's so important to have your ubiquinol in a lead cap, these hard shell capsules, rather than the soft gels, to really protect the integrity of the ubiquinol, so you can be confident that you're supporting that mitochondria on a consistent basis. So very key supplement for not only brain health, but so many other levels in the body. And then berberine and PQQ. Love this combination, especially tied into your mitochondria health, but it also does encourage fat building, fat burning. It does promote healthy insulin, leptin, and other fat function tied into really healthy metabolism, also tied into helping support healthy blood sugar levels already in a normal range, and promoting that healthy insulin sensitivity. So remember, all of that is important, tied into what I talked about in the lifestyle tips. And the berberine and the micro PQQ is also extremely supportive for the mitochondria. The berberine supports the natural cleaning out of the mitochondria, and the micro PQQ supports the overall mitochondria function. So taking something to another level to support the mitochondria is an important way to go, as far as maintaining the healthiest levels of mitochondria you can to support that brain and cognitive function. And when we think of just the overall brain and cognitive support, also, because so far I'm talking about how the complete probiotics support the gut, and then with the gut-brain connection, and I was talking about supporting the mitochondria, and then how the mitochondria specifically supports the brain and cognitive function. So the next supplements are going to be directly related to the brain and cognitive function support overall. And the first one, I think, is extremely important, even to the point where sometimes ask me if I can only start with like one thing for just the brain support, where would I start? And often I say it's the organic fermented beets. You see, because the beets, which it will actually help to increase nitric oxide, or NO, which is a gas in the body that plays a role in many different levels. It plays an important role in supporting normal circulatory function. It also this also plays a role in the interior lining of the arterial system, also protecting those powerhouses of the cell, the mitochondria that I talked about. And where this is so important from a brain perspective, because you see, the fermented beets could be really great also for people who are looking to achieve the best of what they can achieve through their fitness or activity. But that NO, or that nitric oxide that your body produces, simply helps to widen the diameter of your blood vessels, to simply allow a greater volume of blood to flow through, thus providing oxygen and nutrients to your brain and your other organs. Because healthy blood flow, this is such an important thing and I would even either put this in your mind so it sticks there, or even write it down, that healthy blood flow is essential for energy production and overall well-being. And I tell you right now, healthy blood flow is essential for healthy brain and cognitive function. Because even if you're doing something awesome, such as like deep breathing and getting more oxygen into the blood, or if you're taking some amazing supplements or eating some incredible food that are all supportive for the oxygen and nutrient uptake of the brain, it's still dependent on moving the blood to the brain to get the oxygen and the nutrients to the brain. Yeah, so I really, I have to say that this is something also that I take daily in my life, because I want to make sure that I'm getting that oxygen and the nutrients that I'm taking to the brain as well. And then the next two also direct tied completely into brain and cognitive function as far as a support perspective. And the first one is keto krill. You see, cognitive health is tied into different nutrients that you would be able to get into your body, or something known as nootropics. And the keto krill is a combination of omega-3 fatty acids, the DHA and the EPA. Because it comes from krill, it's naturally bound with phospholipids, which helps this to be both water and fat soluble, to have some type of support from an ability to get into the cell. Also, the keto krill contains added levels of what's referred to as MCT oil, or caprylic 8 MCT, to help support this to the brain specifically. And also on top of that, 3 different nootropics, which are all supportive supplements for brain and cognitive health. So really the keto krill is all about supporting your brain and cognitive function. And this is really for anybody who wants to enhance this brain and cognitive function. This could be professionals, artists, athletes, entrepreneurs, or really just simply active adults who are older than 55, who want to maintain the overall brain health into their senior years. And I'll even say, I know there's a number of 55 there. But simply put, the earlier you start supporting your brain and cognitive health, the better. Because you really want to do everything possible, and even the younger years, to make sure you do everything to support their brain and cognitive health for the older years. So you can actually go into those older years, into those golden years, so to say, with a brain in the best capacity that it can be. And I believe that is achievable. Now, another omega-3, and these are actually the 2 omega-3s that I take on a daily basis. And the other is the herring caviar oil. When this came into our line, I will be very candid, I could not get it into my home quick enough, because this is a significant source of omega-3. Also has that phospholipid form. So remember, it's both water and fat soluble. And it has from a brain perspective, for a support of the brain, it has that perfect DHA to EPA ratio of 3:1. This is very similar to the same ratio as mother's milk. And you might ask, well, why is mother's milk ratio of DHA so higher than other omega-3s? It's because when a child is born, that is just the beginning of brain development. The brain development continues, as that child is actually being breastfed by its mother, with this high DHA level of the omega-3s in the breast milk, to really take that brain support of development as that infant growing up. And it has a very similar supportive factor for us as we're older, as far as supporting the brain and cognitive health. It's been well documented with this supplement as well. It has a very high absorption qualities, especially with the phospholipid layer. And with ours, it also, our herring caviar oil extract is also with an MCT oil. And it really makes this custom blend and promotes more of the herring caviar's phospholipid content. So really what it's all about is enhancing its bioavailability, to increase your body's ability to use these omega-3s for supporting your brain health. And also there's also natural sources of choline, which is very important for your brain, your heart, your cells, metabolism, and for your nervous system overall. So those are the 2. I personally take 2 keto krill and 2 herring caviar oil every day, to make sure that I'm giving my brain what it needs. And again, going back to the fermented, the organic fermented beets, tied into the simple fact that once I have the nutrients in my body, I want to make sure that I'm optimizing my circulation, so they can easily and effortlessly get to the brain as well. And then from a brain, and obviously there's other advantages outside of just the brain, but it's tied into the H2, or the molecular hydrogen. You see, very simply, hydrogen is the smallest molecule in the universe. And this can easily penetrate every tissue in your body, including your brain and cellular parts of your body, like your nucleus of the cell, or like your mitochondria. And so with the H2, it's really tied into the bioavailability and the small particle size. And with this, the simple way that you would utilize the H2, these are tablets that you would wake up. I'll give you an example of how I take H2 every day. As I wake up in the morning, I pour a glass of water that's somewhere between like 16 to 18 ounces of water. And I drop that little H2 tablet in there. The H2 then begins to dissolve in the water. And with the technology that Dr. Mercola has come upon, it provides about 8 to 9 parts per million of molecular hydrogen, as compared to the old style of tablets that would have only created 1 to 2 parts per million. So you get significantly more of the molecular hydrogen. And really what this does, it acts as an antioxidant in the body. But remember, it gets everywhere, including in your brain, in the mitochondria, and even into the nucleus of the cell. So what happens is once you've actually put this in your cup of water, you simply wait for it to dissolve to a level of completion. And then as soon after it dissolves, you just drink that down. And now you get to enjoy the molecular hydrogen going throughout the body and getting everywhere, crossing that blood-brain barrier, getting into the brain, getting into the mitochondria, which, as you now know, is so important for your brain, and even getting into the nucleus of cells to really enjoy the support of that antioxidant activity. And you see, we just simply, in this day and age, we need this. Yeah, because if you think of just general lifestyle in our culture, we're all tied into the exposure of so many different levels of mental, emotional stressors, environmental stressors, chemical stressors, physical stressors. All these things are actually creating all this free radical activity, oxidative stress in the body, and even potentially in the brain. So we want something that gets everywhere in the body, and that's exactly what the H2 does. And I'll give you 2 little notes of this too, is that, with your H2, when you're taking this, after you've gone into Marlene's and picked this up, I want you to also recognize that once you drop your H2 tablet in the water, you want to drink this as soon after you see it dissolve, rather than putting in your water, walking away for 10 minutes and allowing the molecular hydrogen to potentially dissipate into the environment in your home. So just be sure to drink that as quickly as you can after. And then the other thing is with your blood-brain barrier. You see, the blood-brain barrier is something that has very little understanding in the general public. And the blood-brain barrier is all about, as the word would kind of imply, taking care of your brain. You see, because number one, there's 3 different barrier systems in the body. There's a gut barrier system. Very often you'll hear about people talking about that if they have something referred to as like leaky gut or intestinal permeability, where that gut barrier system just isn't functioning at its optimal. Or there's also lung barrier system. And then there's the blood-brain barrier system. And you see, the job of your blood-brain barrier system is to keep toxins and other negative impacts from moving from your blood into the brain. And when your blood-brain barrier system is healthy, it can protect your brain from exposure to things like heavy metals or different levels of toxicity you're exposed to, or chemicals you're exposed to, and which is very important. And what's so interesting with this is, well, even think of your body. Think of how your body was created and has evolved to have this blood-brain barrier. So it would make you think that, wow, the brain must be really important. If I have a system solely to keep what's in the blood out of the brain, as far as these levels of toxins or chemicals, it's very well known how important then the blood-brain barrier is from that perspective. And one of my favorite supplements to talk about is in regard to helping protect the blood-brain barrier is it begins also with when we talked earlier about the fermented organic beets, because you want to have a positive blood flow and that optimal blood flow throughout the body on a consistent basis. But then on top of that, to support a healthy blood-brain barrier, we want something that's referred to as glutathione. And that's where the NAC with milk thistle comes in and such an important factor, because the NAC is so important for helping to restore the intracellular levels of glutathione. I want you to understand that glutathione is the body's primary antioxidant. Yeah, so remember, the antioxidants are there to help support all of the free radical activity and oxidative stress that your body is under on a regular daily basis. And trust me, this is going on every day. And so now glutathione is so important in the body that your body has the ability to manufacture it and also to recycle it. And really the NAC provides one of those key ingredients for your body to manufacture and recycle glutathione. Now, a lot of times when people think about NAC or glutathione, they think about the liver, which is still obviously very important for liver function and supporting natural detoxification pathways. Yet the glutathione is also very important for also supporting the barrier systems. So that gut barrier system, the lung barrier system, and then of course, the blood-brain barrier system. And so now on top of that, the glutathione also plays an important role, even with other antioxidant activity in your body. It's been shown that glutathione has a supportive factor for any other antioxidants that you would potentially eat in foods or take in other supplements. So it's really supportive across the board in that antioxidant level. And on top of that, the NAC with the milk thistle will also provide antioxidant mitochondria support. We've already discussed enough how not only how important mitochondria is for your whole body, but how essentially important it is for your brain and cognitive function as well. And on top of that, this also, the NAC with the milk thistle, and also this contains an organic broccoli powder. All of that is supportive for your body's normal detoxification process. And so when we think about this is that, you know, when I was talking about the blood-brain barrier earlier, and if you've got these toxins in your body and the toxins are flowing through your blood, you want to make sure that the blood-brain barrier is in optimal integrity to protect your brain. And at the same time, you also want to get rid of those toxins. Yeah, so supporting the body's natural detoxification processes are very important. So that NAC with the milk thistle plays a significant role down that pathway as well. And so now with this subject, I want to make sure that it's just amazing to me with this information how fast time goes. I want to make sure we had a good 10 minutes for Q&A, because this is always a popular subject where there are typically many questions and comments to be made. And I'm going to stick around, even if we go over the hour, I'm going to stick around until everything is answered. And before I get to that point, I first want to thank you for your attendance. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives for something that I feel is perhaps one of, if not the single biggest thing tied into your health, which is supporting brain and cognitive function. And with that, I'm going to stop the share so we can just pull up the screen here and we could just all chat with each other. So what, first off, did you have anything come across in the chat, Elizabeth, for us?
Not that I see, but now that we're at the Q&A portion, folks feel free to enter in the chat box if you're shy, and you're more than welcome to unmute yourself.
Yeah, and to unmute, if you're, for those of you who are watching the video, just take your cursor and move it onto the video, and you'll see on the bottom left there's a little microphone, and yours will have a red circle around it with a red line going through that. And go ahead and just click on that, and that will unmute you so you can answer or ask your question live. Yes, Catherine.
Hi. I am concerned about this issue because my mom had Alzheimer's, and I have one copy of the gene that is associated with that. So I've been, pursuing different, plenty of exercise, antioxidants, eating well, although I'm not as familiar with the keto type diet. And I'm also listening for a friend who had a very serious brain injury as a young woman. And so I am wondering if you could, I'm confused by the mitochondria. I'm confused by what they do. I mean, I understand the purpose of antioxidants and combating free radicals and certain type of supplements that help you clean out old cells and things like that. But I don't get mitochondria.
Okay, let me make this very simple for you, Catherine. And first off, good for you for already doing some research and doing what you can, especially with the family history and the genetic perspective. And I'll also say, with the understanding in quantum physics is that genes have to be turned on. So there's got to be epigenetics. So something has to be turning it on, which I feel is mostly tied into our diet, lifestyle, and really the nutrients that we get or most often don't get. Now, as far as the mitochondria specifically, the easiest way I can explain this is think of an automobile. So let's say that you went out and you bought a beautiful new Mercedes. The top of the class, all the bells and whistles. It had, the leather package, or you had everything you wanted in it, except it didn't have an engine. That's what the mitochondria is to your cells. The mitochondria is that little engine that drives every cell in the body. And
in the cell, like you showed the picture, and they're in there.
That's right. That's right. 100%. And, so from that perspective, it's, no matter how nice the car is or not is, if we don't have the engine in the car's going nowhere. It's just something that looks good sitting in our driveway. Yeah, so that to me is always the easiest way that I can explain the mitochondria, and it typically makes complete sense to everybody from that perspective. And it's just one of those. I'll even say, Catherine, very often when I do consumer lectures, and obviously I'm talking about, I think I mentioned 7 or 8 different supplements today, and sometimes I'll ask people, as far as supplements go, I very often have people walk up to me and say, if there was one supplement that, like if you could only take one supplement, Glen, what would it be? That's the easiest question in the world for me. I would take ubiquinol if I could only take one supplement. And because I could always, ferment foods to get probiotics. I could I could ferment beets, which would distillate up. I could ferment my own beets for the nitric oxide. I can eat a lot of salmon for the omega-3s. I can eat herring caviar on its own. Like most of what I'm talking about on some level you can get in other ways, yet that mitochondria support is very difficult as we age to get that support without the ubiquinol. So for me, that would be, pun intended, the no-brainer.
Right. So that's how you feed the mitochondria. That's how you support them.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and as I said, that's why. I take a bigger amount than most people. Yeah, but just like, and I haven't. Well, actually, I did. I did a genetic testing some years ago, and to be honest with you, I don't recall even it was so long ago. I don't recall if there were any of the genes tied into any kind of neurodegeneration for me. Yeah, but I also recognize that regardless of what the genes say, they still have to be turned on. There still has to be epigenetics in there. So that's why I'm always focused on doing all of the things that I can on every level, from a lifestyle, from a nutritional, and from a supplement perspective, to make sure that I'm keeping all of this really happy and healthy. And I believe that that's something that we could all do. The only unfortunate thing in today's culture, most people don't take care of the lifestyle and the supplement needs that really are supportive for that brain and cognitive function. So thank you for the great question there. Very helpful for others as well.
Yeah, that was a great one. Yeah, and what I love about the Dr. Mercola product is that it's in that lead cap. So you're going to be able to get the highest value of that product because it's not going to oxidize.
Right. It's it's keeping the oxygen out of that interior of that is so important, which is why, every 100% of our liquid-based products that are encapsulated are in lead cap. Yeah, because of the production. And those are some of the things I love about Dr. Mercola and the line, is that everything is really built around not only the highest quality for the body, not only for also the highest level of absorbability and assimilation, but also supporting the highest level of protection as well. And Catherine, did you have any other questions before we're going to get to the end here tonight?
I am also interested in, I mean, I have books on keto this and keto that, but is there kind of a summary of how I would gear my diet more keto style?
Yeah, a summary would be, so when you eat, have low to moderate amounts of protein. It's not, because if you eat an excess of protein, which is like a good rule of thumb, if you're eating more than 26 grams of protein at one sitting, it's putting too much pressure on the kidneys and creating some other issues in the body. So I always say, at usually a size of a deck of cards or less for a protein amount. And then from a carbohydrate perspective, I would say generally we would look at for the average person at least less than 50 net carbs. A lot of people will go for something like a 30 net carbs, and then just generous, healthy amounts of good quality fats. And I usually say that the best fats to use for most people, because I'm also keeping in mind the most common food sensitivities, and dairy would be one of them. So I usually say any derivative of avocado, olives, or even the coconut, as long as it's not sweetened coconut. And then on top of that, maybe something like macadamia nuts. And then the whole goal of keto is to keep that blood sugar down and make your body metabolically flexible again. So your body can go back and forth easily from burning carbohydrates. And then when there's not enough carbohydrates to burn, then your body can actually burn fat for fuel. And fat, this is the other thing that's so interesting with this, Catherine, is when you burn fat for fuel, you enjoy about 6 or 7 times more energy than burning carbs. And it's a cleaner fuel. It doesn't create as much free radical activity and oxidative stress as it does burning carbs for fuel. And the two best, and I'm not saying this just because they're Dr. Mercola's, is it, because I've read so many books, even written a book on keto. And the best 2 books that I think are great references for keto is Dr. Mercola's Fat for Fuel. And then also very, very important is a keto fast book, because a keto fast book teaches you how you can do keto long-term, because the very strict rules in keto are not necessarily healthy for very long-term. They're healthy to get you to the point where you build that metabolic flexibility. And then once you have that metabolic flexibility, what Dr. Mercola teaches in the keto fasting allows you to do that long-term and continue that success throughout your life.
Okay.
And Elizabeth, do you still carry those books in Marlene's? I know you have in the past.
Yes. Last I checked, I don't think that we had any available on the shelf.
Okay. So fats for fuel and keto fasting.
Right. Yeah. 2 phenomenal books.
Okay.
This is Jasmine. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, Jasmine.
Hi there. How are you?
Hi, doing fantastic.
Good. I'm still in scrubs. Sorry, hence the no video.
No worries.
I have a question. First of all, I love the talk, especially on the topic that you're on. But I do have a question in regards to your keto and then your fermented beets.
Uh-huh.
So I have tried keto because we were trying to apply functional medicine in our practice with our cancer oncology patients. And I wanted to obviously lead by example, right? So I wanted to do it. What I did find for myself, and maybe you have some thoughts on it, is my running really struggled. So as you know, I'm a marathon runner, run about 12 miles a day. And I found myself really, really struggling like the first week. And so then gave up on keto. My assumption is if I continued at some point, that would get easier. Is that the case? Did I just not give it enough time to have that fat burn as fuel? And I just struggled. I felt very sluggish. And then in regards to this organic fermented beets, this is amazing because to me, all I hear is that I'm going to run faster.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that I know that 100% they take the beets for their physical fitness and their activity.
Right.
I know other people who are runners and they take, 2 or sometimes even more fermented beets before everything they do. And as far as with keto, yeah, because the whole thing here is that, here's a hypothetical for you, Jasmine. So let's say your body initially wasn't metabolically flexible. It's kind of in a place where you're just used to burning carbohydrates on a consistent basis. And you've kind of lost that ability to kind of switch from that glucose burning into the fat burning. And sometimes it's even tied into reaching, as they refer to as like with the ketosis per se, where your liver starts to produce the ketones. Because if you don't have that, then the other thing to think about with somebody who has a level of fitness as yourself, you might not have the same level of fat storage that a general person in our culture would be. So then what has to happen is your liver has to hit the level where it's now producing ketones. And the ketones are those little fat droplets produced in the liver that then are released into the bloodstream that your body burns for fuel. Yeah. So I think one of the things is you just might not have gone long enough for that, or maybe during a very initial time period, you were also maybe more aggressive with the running than your body was going to allow you to be, based on the lack of fuel.
Yeah.
And for some people too, and even Dr. Mercola has this in his book, he does reference that if there's any type of deficiencies with your own natural production of cortisol, that could be another thing that could be an issue, especially if it's more in the intermittent fasting stages. So, like with keto, a lot of people, and Dr. Mercola teaches this as well, but there are some people who, when they're fasting, they don't excel with intermittent fasting. And sometimes it's because of what's going on from the cortisol perspective, and there's some other healing that needs to happen on that level. But I really think the biggest thing was really just tied into what happened with your body. You didn't get to the point where you reached that metabolic flexibility yet, and probably if you would have gone a little bit longer, you would have hit that at that point.
That's kind of what I assumed. So thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm buying the organic fermented beets. I'm super excited.
Yes, and what's cool about that too, Jasmine, too, is a lot of people will say, but don't beets have a lot of sugar, right? And they do, but when you ferment them, it eats the sugar.
Oh, that's awesome.
Get all the joy of the nitric oxide without all the detriment of the sugar. So thanks for asking a question. It was a great question.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Great questions tonight.
I know, right? And then also I see that, and thank you for the reminder here. Also, Elizabeth, so if you want to talk more about the discounts at the store.
Yes, so the Dr. Mercola products and also all the ones that were mentioned here tonight are 25% off their original prices till the end of the month. So you have about a couple days to stock up your shelves.
That sounds good.
That is a great deal. And really to the end of the month, that's awesome. So there's still another 9 days left of the month. So more than enough time to get in there. And so any last questions before we finish up tonight from anybody?
The only question I was going to ask Dr. Glen was, when we go through these, every time you go through all these great things, I always get so overwhelmed. I want to take everything. So I appreciate you answering the most important thing that was most important to you. So it gives you a place to start. So I thought that was really good. Yeah.
And I'll be very candid. What I went through tonight, I'd take 100% of that. Yeah. And it's because of my family history, because, I've watched this. These are not things that I ever really want to have to watch anybody go through. And so I have that full commitment again to having, keeping and supporting the happiest and healthy of this as I can through the rest of my life. And I know that this is a big impact on me being able to achieve that. So I think, and I'm not special. We all have the ability to do it. So thank you.
So I have one last question. If I were going to eliminate things from my diet, basically I'm heading towards an anti-inflammatory style diet. So you've mentioned gluten, dairy, and the crossover things like
Yes.
eggs and other things.
Yeah.
And sugar, I guess, would be a big one to,
Yes.
yeah, because that's a carb. Okay.
Right. But yeah, because with the sugar, I mean, if you're following a keto lifestyle, the sugar would be eliminated right off the bat because it's going to add too many net carbs in. And then
Right.
what I found through the years in my practice is the three most significant challenges with food sensitivity are usually wheat, dairy, and corn are usually the biggest of the three. And there could be others as well.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Oh, well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And special thanks for all the support from the Dr. Mercola team and Rev, Keith Witt here, and Dr. Glen Depke. Thank you so much. Always an honor to work with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Pleasure. And pleasure is all mine.
Yeah, and a big shout out to Dr. Glen. That was a great. You did a great job. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's just love sharing on this subject all the time because, I like to think that we could all just enjoy happy and healthy brains.
Exactly. Happy brain equals happy life.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.